Turn-based games. A genre of combat that had become a bit of a pariah. At least that has been the perception throughout the video game landscape in recent years. Often viewed to be a type of combat of the past, where technology and game development have progressed to such a degree where turn-based combat feels archaic for many, and just not enjoyable, but there's always been strong support for turn-based combat by both veteran gamers as well as new gamers. And while a lot of the spotlight in recent years have gone to games that are more action-focused and real-time in nature, turn-based games have never fully gone away. They've merely faded, but now are seemingly making a massive comeback, as the 2023 Game of the Year overwhelmingly was Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 does not invoke gameplay formulas like Pokemon or Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, but it utilizes the Dungeons & Dragons style of combat and gameplay, and uses that rule set to take you on a Dungeons & Dragons style journey throughout the game. And as someone who's made quite a bit of content surrounding Baldur's Gate 3, one of the main things I've heard from people is that the turn-based nature of the game was off-putting to many. And like the internet, there have always been people that engage in good faith arguments where they just simply don't like turn-based combat for whatever reason. And then you have those who engage in bad faith practices who talk about Baldur's Gate 3 just being a point-and-click or not having fun gameplay whatsoever because it's turn-based. So, let's make an argument. I made this defense for turn-based Final Fantasy some months ago, but let's talk about this on the grandest scale of it all, and center on Baldur's Gate 3 and why I love it so much, because the gameplay in Baldur's Gate 3 is really fun and interesting and varied, and it also makes me feel rewarded for learning more about it, for trying new things, and for trying new builds and different combinations of characters. What is the appeal of turn-based gameplay? Obviously, it's not the reaction timing. Turn-based is inherently slower by nature, where you take your time on each character turn to view the landscape of the entire battlefield and judge what you want to do on a moment-to-moment basis. In Baldur's Gate 3, your party is composed of 4 main characters, and those characters can each have individual classes that bring unique abilities or attributes to the table. Some may be able to jump farther, or run farther, or hide, or sling spells, or attack multiple times with melee weapons, or whatever combination you can really think of. Maybe transform, summon other things to the field to aid in your battle and your conquest. Whatever it is, these characters bring unique attributes to the field. Animations can also be a little bit longer and more involved with each ability because you don't have to speed things up to be fun and seamless and reactive in a real-time combat system. So for some people, myself included, a lot of turn-based games can be really immersive on that front and be very cinematic, casting grand old fireballs that rain death and destruction on fools and jabronis. There's a lot of planning and strategy that you can invoke on a moment-to-moment basis to really guide the battlefield from there on out. Baldur's Gate 3 also relies a lot on environmental obstacles. You may be able to knock or shove or push enemies from one elevation to another. They can take fall damage if you spec into it correctly. Using a talent tree available to you later on in the game, you can even increase the fall damage they take when you knock them from a high place to a low place. You can increase that falling damage. Say they are surrounded by alcohol or gas or whatever, you could ignite that with a fire spell and cause a massive chain reaction, or get clapped up in a cave like I did one time. I tend to find turn-based games to be far more strategic in nature, whereas real-time combat tends to be more proactive and reactive in nature. I don't necessarily hold the opinion that one style is better than the other, they just have different strengths and weaknesses, and depending upon what I want out of any given day, those different styles of game can appeal to me. I'm a massive fan of older Pokemon games, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Persona, Fire Emblem, and now Baldur's Gate 3. And I think one of the reasons that Baldur's Gate 3 really pulled me in was the gameplay. Because as someone who has never really played D&D in my life, I just never had a group of people that played D&D to play with. I was unsure about how I would feel about all the RNG associated with Dungeons & Dragons. For those who may not be familiar, nearly every action that you take in the game is dictated, or has its outcome dictated by a dice roll, a D20. a 20-sided dice, and if you hit a certain threshold, you can then pass the skill check. If you hit a 20 specifically, and it's called a nat 20, then you not only succeeded, but you really succeeded, and you may, or may not, end up getting an even bigger reward for hitting that d20. Same thing happens though on the reverse side of things. If you roll a 1, you don't just fail the skill check, you cataclysmically fail it, you critical fail. So not only would you get a negative outcome, but something even worse may happen. For instance, and I'm just making this off the top of my head, imagine you slip and fall on a banana peel, and you roll a 1. If you rolled a 5, you may just fall down and take a little bit of damage, but you roll a 1, so what happens is you slip on the banana peel in such a way where you crack your head open on a nearby rock, and you bleed out and the buzzards come in and rip your guts out. Stuff like that, you know? And I'm generally not someone for RNG. I like predictive elements. I like being able to plan around things that I know. But with D&D, there are ways to augment the dice in such a way to give you an advantage. There's a lot of multipliers or additive skills that you can invoke to make dice rolls far more easy. But what these dice rolls also enable is that the game never gets stale, because anything can happen on any given situation. You're never totally safe. At least you never have that luxury of feeling like you're totally safe and secured, and that you can just take on any challenge. The game at any moment can give you a task that is difficult, and the game, funnily enough, becomes more immersive, even in a combat side of things, because of that for me. Sometimes you may clutch a really low % hit on an enemy, and you feel really good about that, as if you somehow managed to cheat the system, something that you should not have been able to do, and you feel rewarded for that. Whereas the game's not just a matter of face roll forward and kill everything in sight, because you can miss, and you could miss high % attacks for whatever reason, and the tides of battle can change, and you have to be prepared enough to react to where the dice roll. That can sound off-putting to some, but honestly, it's kind of compelled me even more to play the game and to learn more about it. The game feels ever evolving, not just from a story perspective, but also from a combat perspective. And I think what Baldur's Gate 3 also does extremely well is it rewards you for learning more about it and to think outside of the box. For instance, I was playing a multiplayer match with a friend of mine, and we got down into these underground crypts, and there were a bunch of skeletons littering the ground. We knew, because of our previous playthroughs, that those skeletons, if we unlock a certain door, would stand back up. So what we decided to do was to loot all the skeletons and take their weapons away from them. And then my friend went to trigger them all to rise up, but I had planted myself next to a few of them so that when they got up, I can immediately attack them and thin their numbers. That's cool for replayability, but what about for a first playthrough? Well, I decided my first playthrough to loot some of the corpses, and I viewed some weapons to be not worthy of picking up, but then, when the skeletons rose, I suffered the consequence of my choice, and I had to fight those skeletons with those weapons while others were just kind of free-balling it. The game isn't just customizable and open-ended from a story perspective with a lot of player choice and agency, it also is like that for a combat side of things. The way you tackle any individual situation or scenario can be wildly different. And as someone who, for quite a while now, has played a lot of linear games that kind of tell you where to go and what to do, and you're just along for the ride, having a game like this that gives you that breath of fresh air and open-endedness and rewards player agency and for thinking outside of the box, it has been really refreshing for me, and it's been something that has honestly pulled me in. You have all of these mechanics interplaying with one another, where there is some RNG to be had here, but you can still feel player skill and agency and learning the game and the components and the different tools in your kit and maximizing their usage. They interplay with one another to create a whole greater than the sum of their parts. They work with one another to make each individual situation feel like it's ever evolving and can change on a moment-to-moment basis, but you feel rewarded for the more you play, the more you invest in these characters, and the more you learn. Say I come across a group of enemies that may be asleep, but I know that I want to fight them. I could, theoretically, right, put down some alcohol near them, and then maybe light that on fire, burning them awake. Maybe I could do that. The game gives you the liberty to think creatively like that. To use magic, thievery, charm, intimidation, whatever tools you have at your disposal, you can find a way to utilize those tools to your advantage, and to find a creative and unique solution to whatever puzzle the game is throwing at you in any given moment in time. And that's been one of the brilliant things about turn-based games for me over the last few years, is that I view a lot of them as puzzles to be solved. Now, not everyone will find enjoyment out of that, and I can't blame you, we just like different things. But when a turn-based game is able to really invoke that sense of overcoming a puzzle and giving you enough tools and customization at your disposal to find unique and interesting solutions or combinations to overcome whatever challenge the game may throw at you, that is when I find turn-based games to really shine. And Baldur's Gate 3 does that in spades, and does that so well, and has honestly been one of the best games of all time for me in that regard. And every time my characters level up, those levels feel important, they feel distinctive. I unlock new tools to be able to utilize in my kit. I unlock new spells that I can utilize, more spell slots, so I have more resources I can budget in between breaks or short rests, or even long rests. The game rewards me in a game predicated on giving you tools to overcome whatever situation in a unique fashion you can. The game rewards you by leveling you up and giving you even more tools, giving you more and more options. Gear is interesting and fun and rewarding with sometimes interesting effects that can really change your playstyle and change the attributes that you can utilize both in and out of combat in interesting ways. I enjoy customizing my characters and having this sense of preparation before I go into a big fight, positioning my units in such a way to where I can change the tide of combat to be in my advantage. Each of the characters feel distinct and unique, but I can also customize and build them according to my own desires. But they all bring different strengths and weaknesses, but they're able to complement each other's strengths and weaknesses with their own. My party is composed of Tav, who is the player character, Astarion, the thief, Shadowheart, the cleric, and Karlach, the barbarian. So I have two characters who rely on overwhelming physical melee attacks with my Tav and Karlach. Astarion has some spells at his disposal, but is largely a thief, can use a lot of bows or sneak attacks and stuff like that. And then I have Shadowheart, who can use a lot of spells, but also can heal. Each of those characters by themselves wouldn't be able to tackle any situation, but together they are stronger because they are together, because that is a combination of characters that I have at my disposal that I chose to utilize. I get all of their tools that I can utilize. The game becomes far more strategic, and I love the fact that it's turn-based, and I think this game really works because it's turn-based. Because I can stop and think about all these options at my disposal, and how I want to progress each individual scene, but also combat scenario. I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a better game because it is turn-based. Because turn-based gives you enough time to think and strategize about what route or path you want to walk down, and when a game gives you so many options like that, giving you the time to think and to stop and smell the roses and plan and strategize, that works with that playstyle. So for me at least, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a good game, and a game that works as well as it does because it is turn-based. And I think that if it was real-time combat, that would kind of compromise a lot of those principles and design philosophies that I've been talking about throughout this video. I think on the industry as a whole, or throughout it, we are starting to see a bit of a return to turn-based games. They never really went the way of the dodo. They've always been there. They just took a bit of a step back from the spotlight in a lot of ways. Persona's always been there, Pokemon's an absolute behemoth of an IP, and Baldur's Gate 3 has been an absolute smash hit. Same thing with a game like Honkai Star Rail. We are starting to see more games experiment and gain mainstream publicity and notoriety, not in spite of being turn-based, but because they utilize turn-based as a fun and interesting mechanism to where it works for the type of game they are going for. Those games, and especially Baldur's Gate 3, are better games because they utilize turn-based in an interesting and effective format, because there's nothing inherently wrong with turn-based. I don't think it's a style of game that can't hang in the modern day. We have seen it do the other. We have seen it hang, and not just hang, but succeed massively. And I think that is a great thing. Whereas a lot of other franchises like Final Fantasy have migrated away from being purely turn-based or even ATB-based. Some franchises have doubled down and embrace the fact that they are turn-based to effective degree. And that's not to say that turn-based is better than real-time, or that real-time is better than turn-based, but they are both legit and valid methodologies of conveying combat. And when developed and fleshed out properly, and interestingly, and when the mechanisms in the game surround it and support it, turn-based can be absolutely enjoyable and fun and interesting, but you may not realize that you like it until you give it a chance. Like a lot of things, especially in a media all about relaxing or finding fun and enjoyability or some form of engagement out of the product, we can be stuck in a rut, sticking to the things that we know and love and that are tried and true, and not really branching out. But one of the things that I'm really glad that I did years ago is branch out and try Final Fantasy. And this year, try Baldur's Gate 3, try Persona, try Honkai Star Rail, because I've fallen in love with turn-based games that are not just named Pokemon. Because at the end of the day, you may never know if you would love or like something until you try it. That applies to pretty much every aspect of life, but especially for video games. And with that, I will call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in, my pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.